Good morning, good day, good evening, good night, wherever you are dialing in watching video. I appreciate you dialing in for another one of our Sunday School series. We're getting close to the end of this session. I think we got this one and two more after that, or no, we may have one more after this. So we're about to wrap things up, and so this week we are looking at session number 12. This will be 12 out of 13. Now, we got to remember, the last two sessions, of course, we're talking about Joseph, right? And we're talking about how he was sold into slavery. Potiphar bought him as a slave down in Egypt. He was brought to the household. He was made the master's servant of the household. He had control of everything but Potiphar's wife. And, of course, she became the trouble, and she fixed it to where he was put in prison. He was put in prison. And he was there for 2 years before he was called before the Pharaoh to help interpret a dream. And he said, not by me, but by God, he'll give you a favorable answer, which means he'd give you peace, or he would give you an answer whether you liked it or not. And as we find out, and we studied and we saw where the cows in the vision were about the years of good harvest and then years of famine that were coming afterwards. So, and Joseph not only identified the problem, but he gave a solution to the Pharaoh. And as we see, the Pharaoh was very pleased. Now, just to fill in the gaps, we're going to understand the context. I'm going to read what happens in between before we get to today's lesson. So, after remaining loyal to God through the years of trying circumstances, Joseph was rewarded. The Pharaoh positioned Joseph second in command of Egypt. Okay, very important. Thus, the stage was set for Joseph's reunion and reconciliation with his family. The 7 years of abundant harvest were followed by famine. The food storage was severe, and people from far and wide came to Egypt looking for food. So the famine wasn't just about Egypt; it was for the whole region of that world. The famine severity even reached Canaan, so Jacob sent 10 of his sons to Egypt to purchase grain. Joseph's brothers bowed before him according to Joseph's youthful dreams. Remember that now. That was the one that got him in trouble with his brothers, if we go back to look at those sessions. Although Joseph recognized them, they failed to recognize Joseph. Joseph accused his brothers of being spies and determined to test them to see if their attitudes have changed. Okay, he focused on Benjamin, the only other son of Rachel. Joseph imprisoned Simeon until the others should return with Benjamin. When the family had depleted the grain supply from Egypt, Jacob again sent his sons to buy food when Judah promised to take personal responsibility for Benjamin. Jacob reluctantly allowed his youngest son to accompany the others. Now remember, Benjamin is the youngest, and I'm sure that Jacob was kind of worried about losing his youngest. When Joseph saw Benjamin, he was overcome with emotion and left the room until he can regain his composure. According to Joseph's instructions, his brothers ate the new meal, and they were astonished to discover that they had been seated in the order of their age. Okay, so there's a lot of clues going on here, but they're not understanding what's going on. Determined to discover if the brothers had really changed, Joseph arranged one final test. Okay, he instructed his steward to place silver cup in Benjamin's bag of grain. Before the brothers had gone far from the city, Joseph instructed his steward to overtake them to find Joseph's cup. Only the man whose bag the cup was found would become Joseph's slave. Okay, of course, the steward uncovered the cup in Benjamin's sack. The brothers had changed. They refused to desert Benjamin. And this is a far cry from what they did, because they were willing to sell and get rid of and kill Joseph, if you remember. But with Benjamin, they were willing to sacrifice and stay there. They did not want to give him up. And I think part of that is they saw how the loss of Joseph hurt their father Jacob so much that they were like, we can't let that happen again, right? The brothers had changed and refused to desert Benjamin. All returned to the city with the steward, pleaded to remain slaves in place of Benjamin. After Judah concluded his plea, Joseph sent the attendants away to reveal his identity to the brothers. So this is where we are. Again, if you want to go back and look at this, you can just go back and read all of this. It reads up to it, and I encourage you to look at that from 41, chapter 42, because we're going to be getting into 45 now. Okay, so all of this was coming, all of this was taking place. Now, the lesson that we're looking at here is going to be this confrontation and go from there. So, Genesis 45. 1 through 3. Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of his attendants. So he called out, "Send everyone away from me." No one was with him when he revealed the identity to his brothers. Okay. But he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and also the Pharaoh's household heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But they could not answer him because they were terrified in his presence. Okay, so stop there for a second. Now, he sent everybody away, the demand for privacy. What does that mean? Well, it could just mean that he wanted this to be a family affair. I don't think Joseph kind of understood just yet about his brothers. Were they still mean? Were they still evil? You know, if he revealed himself, how would they deny it? What would they do? Would this get to be an ugly situation? And no doubt the Pharaoh's servants and the Pharaoh's household knew full well what was going on. So chances are, you know, he's kind of driving them out so they won't see the spectacle that could potentially happen with him revealing himself to his brothers. Or, you know, I think he probably wanted this to be a family affair. You know, and he probably didn't want to disturb the Pharaoh. He probably, you know, the servants will probably run back and tell the Pharaoh everything and, you know, gossip and all that good stuff. So now we got to keep in mind, this is very important for us, okay? Assuming that Joseph was sold into slavery around 17 when his brothers had sold him, okay? He could have been about 39 when he saw his father again, okay? So this figure, so he would have been about 39. So this figure is based on the fact that he saw, the fact that Joseph was 30 when he entered the Pharaoh's service. We saw that in 41, 46. The 7 years of plenty had passed. 5 more years of the 7-year famine remained. So Joseph had not seen his father in probably 22 years. In Joseph's speech to his brothers, his father was his dominating concern. Joseph had already expressed his anxiety towards his father and well-being. So what's the first thing he says? You know, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" Wow. You know, it's amazing. You know, for 22 years. Wow. I can't imagine, you know, him living with that part of his life. Wow, you know, I mean, I'm speechless when I stop and think about that. 22 years he has been in the foreign land. Yes, he's been blessed, but at the same time, remember now, he has been sold by his own brothers, the ones he grew up with, the brothers of his father, right? They sold him into slavery. They didn't want him. Okay, and he's missed his father for 22 years. Now, could he have ever gone back and he could have visited his father? Yeah, I'm sure he could have, but his business and his priority was there in Egypt. Okay, so that's where the Pharaoh wanted him to work. So he couldn't just get up and go. So he couldn't hold it any longer, and I don't blame him. I mean, you finally get to a point where he just couldn't hold it all in. The decision to reveal himself to his brothers had reached a tipping point, so to speak. So, and they could not answer him at all. So they were terrified, obviously. I think the first thing that went through their minds was, "Oh man, oh crap. This is the kid that we thought we sold into slavery and we would never hear from again. But yet here he is. He's about to kill us all." So yeah, they are terrified, very much terrified. Now, if we look at Kittner makes a good point, and I think that when we read this, we kind of get an understanding of what is going on in Joseph's heart. The certainty that God's will, not man's, was the controlling reality in every event leading up to this, shines out as Joseph's guiding light and the secret of his astounding lack of rancor. Okay, what does that mean? Um, well, it's real simple. The fact that he knew God was in control, that kind of withstand that kind of shows that he really didn't have much of a grudge, right? I mean, he didn't. As soon as he saw his brothers, he didn't yell off with their heads, right? He wasn't, with God's grace and God being with him, God blessing him, and God showing the favor to him, um, and then confronting his brothers. Joseph was a different person. You and me we may be completely different. Yeah, I would have told them off with their heads. We don't want them, So, but at the same time, he had a yearning for his family and especially his father. In this passage, strong feeling and sound spiritual argument complete the work of reconciliation, which had called for surgical severity through the early stages. It had been a task for the whole man, patiently sustained by conviction and not mere impulse. Wow. So to me, Kittner is saying everything that is of Joseph and what he has relied on with God in his life to this point has brought him to this point where he can say God is still in control. Okay, it didn't matter if he ever saw his brothers or his family again. He was at peace and God was with him. Okay, so and we're getting into that message and that understanding with Joseph as we move forward. So then 4 through 8, Genesis 45, 4 through 8. When Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near me," they probably all backing up against the wall, terrified. And they came near. "I am Joseph, your brother," he said, "the one you sold into Egypt. And now don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." Wow. "For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He had made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt." Wow. When I was studying this, I was really blown away. And every time that I read about Joseph, I'm blown away. Look at what he's saying. "Please come near me." He's inviting them. He's telling them, don't be afraid. I'm sure they were backing out, trying to find the exit. They were shameful. They were terrified. For one, this powerful man is going to kill us. Or two, they were looking for an exit so they could run and hide from their sin and shame. But he was telling them, "Come near me." And they listened to him. "I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt." Now, I don't think that he said that in a manner to accuse them of a crime. I think he did that with the servants gone to prove to them that he knew he had to prove himself and that only he and that his brothers would know that circumstance. So Joseph said that. He's saying, "This is me because this is what you did." So this was a revelation to them. If they had any doubt before then, Joseph just wiped it away, did he not? Because he told them, "Yeah, it's me. I'm the one you sold into slavery." So now he's saying, and he immediately, and right after that, he's saying, "And now don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." Wow. Now, when he's first sold into slavery, I doubt that was in his mind. And I really doubt that when he was working in Potiphar's household, that was in his mind. I really doubt when he was in the king's prison for those years, I doubt that was in his mind as well. I think once he heard the Pharaoh's dream, and the Pharaoh put him in charge, I think the enormity of the task before him finally settled in his soul, and God kind of revealed the importance of what he was doing. Okay. And it wasn't necessarily for Joseph and his family, it's for everyone. Now, if we go back and we remember the covenant that God made with Abraham, look, it's being fulfilled through Joseph, is it not? God is taking care of his withholding his end of the covenant. So yeah, he's telling them like, this is what's going to happen. Things are about to get worse. So, so God sent me ahead of you to establish as a remnant within the land to keep you alive by great deliverance. So he's saying God sent me as a forebearer to help preserve you. So this is God's plan. Therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. Wow, that is a man of deep conviction when he says, the wrong that you did to me was actually God's plan. Wow. I mean, that just blows me away. So, reading some of these notes that we have, wisely saying, he recognized, although his brothers were meant evil for him, he saw the good in it. God was showing him good through these circumstances. Joseph interpreted his experience, both good and bad, from divine perspective. Remember that. I'm going to repeat that. Joseph interpreted his experience, both good and bad, from a divine perspective. Wow. That's what we need to do, is it not? We need to look at our experiences, both good and bad, and say, how is this working for me? What is God doing for me in this moment in my life? What's the purpose here? What's the reasoning? What's the plan? Talk to God, pray to God, read the scriptures, and find out what that is. What's God's plan for you today? Now, so we look at this, the father of the Pharaoh. Now, father to the Pharaoh we got to discuss that. So it's not like he was actually above the Pharaoh. What it was he was a special advisor to the king. Father may designate person held in high regard, which I believe he was. The Pharaoh saw Joseph as being indispensable, okay? Not because of Joseph as he is, but the fact that Joseph was able to hear the problem, which was in the dream, and come to a solution. And all that is through God, because Joseph, remember, the first thing he says, I can't help you, but God can. So I think that the Pharaoh knew right away he had someone special in his court, okay? And based on the recommendations that Joseph gave in regards to a wise and discerning man taking a fifth of the grain throughout the years to meet this need, he knew that Joseph was the man for the mission, okay? So Joseph has pretty much put himself in a very prominent place with the Pharaoh, okay? So that's very important. So that's where all of that's coming to be. So that's where and I think that Joseph said that to his brothers to let them know, not to brag about what he's doing, but showing where God is leading them, showing what God has done and what God has done despite their sin, despite what they have done. So it's pretty amazing stuff, I tell you. All right, so moving on, 45, 9 through 15. Return quickly to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down with me without delay. Wow, can you imagine the brothers having to go back and do this? It probably is going to be a lot easier because Joseph has fully forgiven them and he is longing to have his family with him, is he not? He wants to take care of his family. He longs for this more than anything. So he's telling them, go back and tell dad, hey, I'm going to take care of everything. So come back to me without delay. You can settle in the land of Goshen and be near me, you, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, and all you have. There I will sustain you, for there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise, you and your household and everything you will become destitute. Look, your eyes and eyes of your brother Benjamin can see that I'm the one speaking to you. Tell my father about all my glory in Egypt and all about you, all you have seen. Excuse me, and bring my father here quickly. So he's telling them, like, don't delay. Do it now. Then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin wept on his shoulder. Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept, and afterward his brothers talked with him. Wow, this is a very powerful moment, okay? But look at what's happening. Despite the family reunion, the reconciliation that is possible, how is it possible? Through God, okay? That's how it's possible. And despite all this, Joseph is saying, return quickly to my father. Wow, he yearns to be with his father. That's how our approach needs to be, is it not? Look at this where Joseph is in, or God's in Joseph's place, and we have come to him and trying to cover our sins. And we're telling him, come to me quickly, settle near me, and I will take care of you, right? There's so many parallels here that it's just unreal. So now look at breaking some of this down. By stating that God had made him Lord and Master of Egypt, Joseph acknowledged that only God could have brought him through this unbelievable turn of events. Amen. That's exactly what he's saying there. This Goshen that they're talking about, just to make sure about that, differs from the Goshen mentioned in Joshua, which was located in the Promised Land. So the Goshen that they will eventually settle in there at the Delta, at the Nile, is not the same that Joshua will cross into. So keep that in mind. Why Benjamin? Benjamin was actually his blood brother through both his parents. The other brothers were from different mothers. Okay, so Benjamin was his real blood brother through both his mother and father. Okay, so we see the closeness there, and that's very important. They wept. The scriptures record that only Joseph and Benjamin wept on this occasion. They're the only two that were crying. The rest of the brothers talked with Joseph. The fact may reflect that the other brothers questioned Joseph's kindness as genuine, and I believe that. Later, when the father died, they revealed their fear that Joseph might retaliate. We see that in Genesis 50. So I think the brothers, do I think that they have changed themselves? I believe so, based on everything I'm reading in Scripture. Do they regret what they did? Of course they did. They probably felt shameful about it. To some extent, each of them probably thought about that occasionally, what they did to Joseph. It was a secret that was probably a sinful secret that was probably eating away at their soul and their minds and their hearts, trying to keep this together, keeping it silent and away from their father. So I can imagine that, some more than others. But in the end, look how it works out. Joseph is alive. His dreams are being fulfilled. They did bow down to him, did they not? And so they probably were still scared, but but above all, they saw the miracle of what God had done. Joseph put God first, and he explained to his brothers, through God, all this is possible. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. Okay, so how often can we say that in our lives? Very important question. How did Joseph demonstrate that his forgiveness was genuine? Well, he pulled them close. He brought them close. He hugged each of them. He cried. He was showing the emotions. But he also gave them instructions. Without delay, go back to dad. And he's saying, come to me. It wasn't like I forgive you and walk away. No. He's inviting them to come live up near him so he could take care of them, okay? By this time, we're 2 years into a 7-year famine, and he knows things are going to get bad. The brothers have experienced 2 years of famine, and it's terrible. And so here you have the brother who is pretty much the second in command, who controls all of Egypt, saying, I'm going to take care of you. Wow, that's a demonstration of genuine forgiveness if I've ever seen it. Because I know a lot of times when we forgive people, we forgive them and we move on. How often do we forgive someone, but yet we'd say, I still want to hang out with you. I still want you close. It's a hard thing to do, is it not? But yet Joseph is saying, the same brothers who threw me in the pit, who planned for my murder, he probably didn't know about the ones that wanted to kill him, but those who sold me into slavery, I'm going to take care of them. Wow. Very powerful. Now, summarize. The believers can rejoice over reconciliation with others. Believers can affirm God's plan for their lives. Believers can demonstrate forgiveness to others. Those 3 points. Amen. We can see that every time. Now, if we go back and look at Holman, okay, real quick, convincing of dad. Pull this out real quick. Okay, Joseph had revealed to his brothers the knowledge that he had at the present family would last another 5 years. Yes, we covered that. His brothers were assured that Joseph harbored no ill will towards them. He believed that God had overruled their evil plan in order to guarantee the family of Israel would survive. Yes, he did. He urged them to bring their father Jacob back to them and make plans to live in Egypt. Joseph, in anticipation of his brothers' repentance, had already made plans for where they could live, Goshen, and they would be near him in order to encourage Jacob to make the move even at his advanced age. He was to be told about the honor accorded to me, Joseph, in Egypt. Part of the Abrahamic covenant, especially the promise that the great name was being fulfilled in Jacob's son Joseph, because God made me Lord of all Egypt. Wow. So what is Holman pointing out there? You know, him telling them to bring father here, and this is what you need to tell him. I can tell you right now, Jacob heard this and he knew God's at work here. Whether or not the sons believed that Joseph and Jacob may have been the only two in the room that would believe that God is upholding his end of the bargain, the promise made to Abraham. But the fact of the matter, it happened, okay? And so Joseph is telling his father, look, God is indeed at work here. And just as you said, just as you brought me up, this is really happening. So that I think that's a very insightful thing to remember, because God's promise is still going on. That covenant he made with Abraham is still being fulfilled as we go through these lessons. We're seeing it, are we not? Here's a question for you. What is something from the session that you could share with a person seeking healing and restoration in a relationship? How do you need to demonstrate your forgiveness to someone who has wronged you? Okay, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to let you think about that. And I'm going to ask you this again. What is something from this session that you could share with someone seeking healing and restoration in a relationship? How do you need to demonstrate your forgiveness of someone who has wronged you? I want you to think about those questions as you study what Joseph has done with his brothers. Wow, 22 years is a very long time. You may have some sin, something that has been bothering you since who knows how long, 30, 40 years, your whole life from childhood, and you need to put that down. You need to put that past you. Where has God got you now in light of the fact that someone has sinned against you or has hurt you in some way? Bring it to God and let's see where God has made good out of the bad that is in your life, okay? All right, thank you for watching the video. I appreciate your time as always. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment below. Subscribe to the channel. Every time a video is posted like this, you'll get notified whenever they are available. If you can make it to Web Baptist, would love to have you here as our honored guest, not a visitor. You can come in and worship with us, Bible study with us, fellowship with us, have fun with us, eat with us. Whatever it is, we are welcome to come into our place of worship with us, and find your place here at Web Baptist, okay? If you can't make it to Web Baptist, by all means, please find a Bible-based church wherever you are and get plugged into that church family. I guarantee that you're going to be a blessing to them as much as you will be a blessing to those, or however. Either way, y'all are going to be a blessing to one another. Get involved and let's find out what God's got in plan for you, because he does have a plan for each and every one of us. And we just got to reach out and get that thing going, okay? All right, until next time, take care and God bless.